Hello everyone, my name is Torrin McAlatin. This is my Humanities engagement project on Jackson Pollock. I did the visual presentation, my bad, it is 11 o'clock p.m. The night before. And yeah, let's get right into it. As we can see, the painter I chose for this week is Jackson Pollock. I titled it The Life, Love, and Influence of History's Weirdest Painter, and you'll find out why. And it's by me. References for each background will be on the bottom left. So who is Jackson Pollock? Jackson Pollock is a man that's very much an enigma in terms of the world of painting. He is a very strange individual, to say the least, but he started off very not. Came from a rural town called Cody, Wyoming, and you will find that out in the next page. But he is actually the founder of American abstract art and expressionism in the painting world. I have a quote from Britannica.com here, and I'll be reading that, not word for word, but kind of summarizing it. They said that Jackson Pollock was an American painter. He was the leading exponent to abstract expressionism, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of his paintings, they quote it as being characterized as free associative, which is very much having to do with his personal gestures, his personal actions. You could see how in the paintings, the strokes that he made, and this is due to his painting technique, which we will explore later. Here's the next slide. About his background. This is a picture of him from his high school yearbook, right before he moved out to go study. But as I mentioned, born in a rural city in Wyoming, born in the year of 1912. I put a fun fact that he was born less than 3 months before the sinking of the Titanic, so he wasn't really, old enough to know that. But his first ever influence in the artistic world came from his father, who was a government land surveyor. His name was Leroy Pollock, who took Jackson on some of the trips that he had to survey Native American lands, and he would actually get to see the art that the Native Americans would do, which is very interesting to me. He moved a total of 9 times over the course of his childhood, which influenced a lot of his instability, not being able to find friends. He's very socially awkward throughout most of his life, and that kind of bled over into his adulthood. I titled this An Artistic Uprising because he, at the age of 18, moved in with to follow his brother's footsteps, moved to study at a place called the Art Students League. He studied there for about 3 years, learning under a man named Thomas Benson about just a lot of regular painting styles and whatnot, but he wasn't able to stay due to financial difficulties because it was around the part of the Great Depression. He actually got his big break being funded by the Federal Art Project, which was through President Roosevelt's New Deal plan, which tried to restart the economy after the Great Depression, and was actually paid to do art for the government. Well, by the government, but it was awesome that he got to get paid to do what he loved, and they basically commissioned him, I think it was a monthly or a yearly stipend to keep doing what he was doing, so he was able to live financially stable and focus on art. Oh, my bad, sorry, it's the wrong way. I did have a quote, I'm sorry, at the bottom. It says that the paintings that Pollock made during this period demonstrated his ability to portray his personality in his paintings, as well as his complex synthesis of source material. To kind of elaborate, he took a lot of his information based off the teachers that he learned under and the artists of the time. The most notable was Pablo Picasso, and I think it was Diego Rivera is another mural painter of Latin American origin that he learned a lot from. I titled this Pollock, A Fractured Man, because this delves into more of his background while he was learning to paint. He suffered from alcoholism throughout most of his life, starting at a young age of 16, and it was one of his biggest obstacles, but also biggest influences. As he was being treated from the late 1930s to early 1940s, a lot of his doctors would use his art as a way of him expressing his internal feelings, but also as a way of counterbalancing and using it as a way to let him vent. Instead of drinking, he would paint or draw or take out his anger, the things he would do there. He actually suffered a breakdown in 1938, which caused him to be mentally hospitalized, but this led him to start changing his painting style and not follow just the things that were being taught to him, but to start free thinking in his own painting style, which led into his first examples of Expressionism. This is the Pollock we know today. His first major breakthrough came through the form of a contract that he got after the government federal art project ended. He was sponsored by a person named Peggy Guggenheim, who was the owner of Art of the Century Gallery in New York City. He painted his first full-size mural at this gallery, and this garnered him some major attention. This piece was the piece that actually got the attention of both Life and Vogue magazines, which would later track along his progress and eventually titled a piece called Jackson Pollock, the Artist of the Century, I believe it was called. Basically, it was supposed to or is he the greatest artist of our time? And it was supposed to be both mocking and complimenting his art because it was so unique, so new, so fresh, people didn't understand it. In 1947, this was the first instance he used his very famous pouring technique. It was called the drip process, where instead of the traditional brush stroke, he would end up pouring the paint either from the can or from an object, a brush, knife, fork, utensils. I think he used a shovel once. I found it a fun fact, but basically he would spend weeks on each piece between pouring sessions, just to try to kind of see what his mood was that day or take a fresh look at it. And the thing is, with pouring, he could lay things over it. So if he didn't like how something looked one way, he would pour over it with another color or another stroke. You could see in the actual pours how intense he would pour or how soft he would. And it's a very interesting way of explaining that. I got that information from Botanica.com. I didn't quote it, I just summarized it. In the end, unfortunately, he passed away from a very sad car crash near the height of his career. I believe it was 1957 was when he died, and it was in his convertible. He passed away while drunk driving because he was still fighting alcoholism, and it got the better of him, unfortunately. But he was near the almost height of his career at this moment in time. But the quote that I have to kind of finish it off says, "Just like Vincent van Gogh and Impressionism, Jackson Pollock's impact on American abstract expressionist movement is tremendous. He made it possible for American painting to compete with European modernism by applying modernism's logic to a new problem. He created a new scale, new definition of surface and touch, a new syntax of relationships among space, pigment, edge, and drawing, displacing hierarchies with an unprecedented and powerful, fabulously intricate, self-generating structure." And that was from his associates, but also I pulled a lot of those words from a textbook. And here are my references. Use the same picture, and I thank you for listening. Hope you have a great evening.